Hi guys, Tucker here with a new video, and this video will be a PvP overview about Priest in TBC Classic Anniversary. We are currently in Warmane, so that's all the testing that will be done by me. Obviously, Warmane, is it going to be one-to-one with TBC? I mean, that's something you can decide for yourself. I truly believe like most of the things that you're going to see on Warmane is like something that will be likely to in TBC Classic, because everyone is geared here. Everyone is geared by arena gear. For example, I have Merciless. Not everyone is going to have Merciless full gemmed, fully enchanted. So all the fights are going to be harder here than in TBC Classic Anniversary. So the resilience is going to be quite high. The levels normally is a bit higher because those are the dedicated players from TBC. And we're going to talk about Priest here. And Priest is going to be very interesting because you have multiple builds, multiple talents that you can play without any issues. But there is a meta, and I'm going to start with Shadow Priest. I think Shadow Priest is the least likely that you're going to play in arenas because it is quite hard to do so. You can find maybe a mate that is playing Rogue or Mage or maybe Warlock, and you can make it work, but you are going to be victimized most of the time because you are going to be the one that is going to be at the focus, which is rightfully so. As a Shadow Priest, you are going to have to cast Vampiric Touch, Mind Blast, Mind Flays to do damage, which is normal. Every single caster needs to cast something, but you don't really have great CC that is like avoiding damage. Obviously, you have Fear, which is great, and you have Silence, which is also great. But a Fear doesn't help versus a warrior, versus a rogue that is going to cloak, for example. You have some good matchups, but you are mostly facing like bad matchups. It doesn't mean that you are not able to get rank 1 if you really chase for rank 1. I think you can do that if you're like a competent Shadow Priest. But you will rely a lot on the teammate. If the teammate is not rank 1 or like very good, you're not going to be able to get to that point. You don't need to be rank 1. Like, I don't think everyone should aim for rank 1. But will you have fun as a Shadow Priest in arenas? I personally have my doubts because I personally didn't really had a lot of fun in arenas as a Shadow Priest. The main problem is your dots don't crit, so you don't really scale well. Resilience lowers like dot damage. It's like very noticeable as well. Like here you can see reduces the mana drains and the damage of critical strikes by 18%, and reduces the periodic damage and chance to be critical hit by 9.36%. So you're like less likely to crit. You're less likely to do a lot of damage with periodic damage. So they're like hitting very hard on Affliction Warlock and Shadow Priest, for example. Even Feral Druids, even though you're not really playing around your dots as much as in Wrath. Reduces the effect of mana drain, so mana burn is getting a hit as well, and the damage of critical strike. So the crit damage is not going to be 200% more damage when you're critting, obviously. So that's going to be like the thing that is going to be a baseline very high in arenas, and you are going to have a bit of a difficult time like getting damage off. Now the role of a Shadow Priest is not really to just do damage. You do your CC, you do your Prayer of Mendings, you do your shielding. You will lose shadow, like your shadow form, by doing Prayer of Mending, for example, but that's very important to do if you're facing, let's say, a cleave, or you're facing an SLSL. He's going to dot like both the healer and the DPS, for example, or the double DPS. They're going to dot. And Prayer of Mending has a lot of value. It heals very high, even as a Shadow Priest. It takes for 800 without like spell power in mind. So it is going to be your best healing ability if you're like facing like dot heavy like comps, or like very cleave heavy comps. For example, if you're versus an arms warrior and you're next to each other, Prayer of Mending is the thing that is going to help you survive. And your goal is to like dispel a lot, mass dispel when you face like a mage or a retribution paladin, and you can actually like just spam it, right? There's a GCD, obviously. It's 0.5 seconds for a Disc Priest. For a Shadow Priest, it is not going to be as fast. It's going to be a 1.5 second cast, but it's still very worth to do, and it's going to help you like finish off games at least versus mages, reds for example, or holy paladins if you do see them. So that's something that is mandatory to learn, that you are not really there only to deal damage, but you are also a support, and you mostly are a support. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. Now, the Shadow Priest can have a lot of fun in BGs, and you could also have fun in arenas, don't get me wrong. I just don't recommend it, but you can have fun. But you should not multi-dot. If you're multi-dotting, so if you're dotting multiple targets at the same time, you can test it on Warming if you want to, but to be fair, I think you should know, even in Classic, if you do put like 3 Shadow Word Paints, your mana is just Fuchi, gone forever, and especially if you're doing Vampiric Touches as well, even though it does regen a bit of mana, if you do go Vampiric, like you should go Vampiric Touch if you're Shadow Priest, by the way, but you regen a bit of mana, but that mana is never going to be like regening as much as what you spend on your dots on multi-dotting stuff. So that's not going to help you at all. If you just like focus one target down, you have at least your Mind Blast, you have your Shadow Word Death, which again I like to play Shadow Power. For example, I play Shadow Power with 12% crit. Being able to do a Mind Blast crit and a Shadow Word Death crit in a row, that kind of helps you with to like end games, or to have like a big starter go with your friend. And obviously if you win, that could help you win the game a lot easier. Some people don't play with Shadow Power, I understand. Again, you're not spamming Shadow Word Death, and you're also not spamming Mind Blast, so it's something that you need to see for yourself if it's worth it or not. I like to play also like improved Mind Blast to be able to have like a lower CD on Mind Blast, and I don't play with improved Vampiric Embrace because it doesn't really matter too much. You could also play Shadow Resilience to also be able to be likely to be critted, but those are like the things that I do. And in BGs you can have fun if you're like focusing just one target, and you can like just 1v1s, maybe 1v2s, you can have some fun. But you do get and is still like a thing for Priest. Like, it's not because you're a mana battery in raids that you are a mana battery in BGs and PvP. That's not really the case. And you can also play like a bit of a hybrid, not really a hybrid, but you play with a mana burn. So you could actually just do mana burns instead of like purely Mind Flays once you have done your Mind Blast, because then you also do a lot of damage with your mana burn and obviously your Mind Blast, so you have like direct hits, while Mind Flay is like more of a cast channel thing, so you're most likely getting stopped very quickly. But it's interesting to play around, and you do not lose your shadow form if you're doing mana burn, so that's something you keep in mind. Every race has their own abilities, kinda. For example, Night Elf has Star Shards and another like Touch of Elune or whatever it's called. I don't play Night Elf, so not really that interesting. I think you have the region of mana as a Draenei, like Prey of... I don't know how it's called, so basically it's a buff that you put on yourself and you get mana. So that's something good, I guess, for raids. I don't know if it's really good in PvP, because I think it's dispellable. But it's a 3-minute CD, it's not a channel, so it could be interesting. Also, as a dwarf, which I am on Classic Anniversary, you get Chastise. So it is not Chastise as in retail where you stun, it is a root. And it's actually a very good one. But it is a holy spell, so you do lose your shadow form, and it's most likely better to be able. It's just better to be able to focus on playing Disc Priest if you're like a dwarf. As a human, you get like a shadow spell or like a disc spell, but you can use it in shadow form, which is feedback, and that's one of the most terrible spells you can actually play. I find it very bad, because again, if you are getting like a caster is casting spells onto you, it's pretty terrible. I think the only thing that is really good is when someone is trying to dispel you the whole time. Feedback is going to help you because he's going to spam the dispel, right? so that you have a lot of value. But like a pure caster that's casting a frostbolt, you have like no value onto that. Like it doesn't do too much, so it is what it is. Then you have Devouring Plague as a undead, and like the other Touch of the Grave or whatever. You have as a troll, you have Shadow Guard, which is really strong. And as a Blood Elf, I don't know. I don't know what you get as a Blood Elf, actually. I haven't tested. Should have tested, but I don't really care too much about Horde because I'm Alliance. They get something most likely also, but I think if you like Horde, you should be playing Troll or Undead, because especially as a Shadow Priest, because it's really just good. Like Devouring Plague, it does cost a lot of mana, but it gives you a lot of damage based on that. Like at that single dot can help you with finishing games. And I think it's a disease, so not everyone can dispel disease or has to bind disease on their bars, which is not always the case for everyone. So there is that. Now, Disc Priest, let's talk about Disc Priest. I think Disc Priest is the one that people will play the most as a priest. It's not a surprise that it is the best healer, or maybe top 2 healer, depending on who you're talking to, because there is Resto Druid as well, which I will be making as the next video, Druid. As a Disc Priest, you have a lot of good comps, like you can play with a Rogue Disc, you can play Mage Disc, you can play also with a Warrior, although I think Warrior is better suited with a Resto Druid, because it lacks the CC, while Druid has the CC to help the Warrior to finish off the games. You could play maybe Hunter Priest, but that's like is also interesting, but I don't really like too much, because you'll be spamming heal a lot of on the Hunter. If it's not a good Hunter, if it's a good kiting Hunter, you will be able to do mana burns a lot, and that will end the games really quickly. And you have great CC, that's also very interesting to play around. But most likely as a Resto Druid, you play like with a Lock, you play with a Hunter, you play with maybe with a Rogue, you play with a Warrior. While this Priest has a bit more, it's a diverse comp situations, right? You can play with anyone. I think with a Warlock it's not really that interesting, for example, because you're like really like 2 heavy casters, and you can peel for each other, but you have like 1 CC that is sharing the DRs, which is Fear, so you don't really want that when it comes down to arenas. So that's one thing, obviously. Disc Priest has multitude of comps, which is really cool. A multitude of builds, which is really cool. For example, I am playing currently 46 Discipline Priest with 2 in Holy Talents and 13 in Shadow, and you have Mind Flay basically. And Mind Flay kind of replaces like Smite. I don't Smite at all, and I don't Holy Fire at all as well, because we are not playing with the like Divine Fury, so your cast times are quite long for heal, greater heals, Holy Fire and Smite. But every single time when you do get to cast, you're doing Mind Flay. And Mind Flay has a chance on Blackout, which is cool. And you actually deal some surprising okay damage. Now, it's not like surprisingly like impossible to heal kind of damage, but it actually adds up. And you can solo 1v1 like fairly quicker than, let's say, a normal Disc Priest. It makes for being able to be a bit more surprising. I'm playing also with the mana burn talent, so I am also mana burning most of the time as well. But if I'm facing someone that has like no mana, or let's say it's a Resto Druid that sits in bear form, there is no reason to mana burn because it's not working. You should be trying to do Mind Flays, Mind Blast, Shadow Word Deaths, if you are like both full health and with shield, for example. So you need to shield, like for example the Warrior. If you're playing with a Warrior, you put a Prayer of Mending onto each other, or like one of like depending on who you're facing, and you can then, like, let's say if you are on the offense, put a Shadow Word Death, Shadow Word Pain, Mind Blast, Shadow Word Death afterwards, just to deal the damage, and then you can just spam Mind Flay, and it actually deals some okay damage overall. Now, are you doing Shadow Priest kind of damage? No, obviously, but that's not really your role. Your role is, if you're able to do some damage as a filler, you can do Mind Flays. I find it very fun, actually. Like, I think if you would ask me, do you recommend Disc Priest? For me, it's a whole big yes. You should be playing Disc Priest if you're playing TBC, if you're looking into a healer, if you're looking into a versatile class, because you can play Disc, you can play Shadow, and even if you're thinking about PvE, it's a very, very, very high likely class to be inside of a raid. If it's a Shadow Priest or a Disc Priest or a Holy Priest, like the healing specs, I don't know which one is the most meta. I think the most meta is probably Holy Priest, because you have Circle of Healing, which is a very good talent. But in like PvP, you don't really play with Circle of Healing. It's a lot of mana for little health, little health, and in general, I think Disc Priest is really fun because you are a very offensive healer and you can end the games quicker. I think Resto is on one of the boring healers because you are ending with CC and your damage is really not there. You could play Restokin or Dream State, but that's not even like the issue. Is you're keeping your HOTS and you're trying to survive most of the time because they are going to go onto you because they want to force you onto bear form. But obviously, if you have the CC and you're able to cast, like Rafts are okay, Starfire are okay, Moonfire is okay, but remember, like it's still like you're playing classic TBC, and TBC druids don't have that Heart of the Wild talent. You don't really have the damage what you can do, like that you can do later down the line with expansion. So that's kind of my 2 cents. I think this priest like is really interesting, and I will be maining a priest. I think I already have level 60, so it's very easy to just like start up a priest and level at level 70 once TBC is online. I think it's also one of the most likely classes to be able to do PvP and do well with PvP. Is it a hard class to play? I think all healers are really hard to play in my opinion. Because like the damage is really spiky at the beginning, and one mistake just makes you lose a game. That's what I like about Classic. It's very hard compared to Retail in my opinion, because in Retail you can win like in a glimpse, or you can also come back very fairly quickly, because again you have a lot of CTs that you can expand depending on who you're facing and what you're facing. So it's a bit different. Like I know some people do say that Retail is harder. I play Retail, I play Classic. I feel Classic is harder because it is like more like damage is constant and you don't really have like one big CD or to spend, and then like for example Shadow Dance for Rogue, Solo Tier Rogue, just you deal damage all the time actually. You're not really trying to do Shadow Dances or like fighting for a chance to do another Shadow Dance, for example. But that's my 2 cents. I think TBC is really great. I'm looking forward to this series. I'm going to do this series for every single class. Hopefully people do watch it or are interested into it. If they're not, it's not a problem. I'm going to do these videos for myself as well to be able to think out loud. Priest is on my radar. So do you recommend Disc Priest? Yes, I would recommend Disc Priest. I think the fun factor is 9 out of 10 if you're looking for a healer. I think not 10 on 10, because it's very hard to give a 10 out of 10 for a healer in my eyes. You have the viability, you have the dual spec ability, like being able to do Shadow Priest if you want to. I think also the likelihood to find teammates is very high as a Disc Priest. I recommend 100% Priest if you're looking into healing. If you're just looking into Shadow Priest and never touch Disc Priest, I would not recommend it, because I think other classes do a bit better than Shadow Priest in a lot of ways. Now you can have fun as a Shadow Priest. I'll be playing Shadow Priest as well, like in TBC, but like don't get me wrong, I think the easier time in arenas would be Disc Priest. Like I think you could be Shadow Priest geared and still do fine in PvP as Disc Priest, so that's something you need to keep in mind and to play around if you want to. Again, thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye.